What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today I wanted to talk about the kind of wealth of information we've gotten the past couple weeks regarding the new Dragonlance books that are coming out. And Dungeons and Dragons has been posting quite a few videos to their YouTube channel with some previews of what we can expect and what we can look forward to. And I want to discuss and break down what we saw in the videos in terms of specifically the player choices, the options that players are going to have when they're playing in this campaign or in this setting at large, what Wizards of the Coast is going to be offering, and my thoughts on them. So I'm actually going to start with the most recent player option video that got dropped, which is the Lunar sorcery subclass. Obviously, it's for the sorcerers, and it is an option that basically your magic is fueled by the moon, and the moons dictate magic at large in Krynn. And the way they describe it, it's a very safe path they've decided to take, because obviously in older editions, based on my research and the way they discussed it, older editions, your magic was literally fueled by the phase of the moon. And so based on the time of the month that you were adventuring, then your magic would change and shift and alter. The moons, there are 3 moons in Krynn, but your magic would be altered by the state of the moons, which is interesting and kind of weird and different and funky, I guess is the best way to put it. What they have decided to do is very akin to the Eladrins, where, they are fueled by various seasons, but when you finish a long rest as an Eladrin, you can choose what season you are being fueled by. And I would guess, they didn't say this specifically, but I would guess a similar thing where when you finish a long rest, you choose what phase of the moon, the new moon, the full moon, the crescent moon, what phase of the moon is fueling your magic. So let's talk pros and cons real quick of this decision. Pro, player agency is always a great thing to prioritize. Allowing the players to be in charge of the spells that they have access to, what their magic does, etc., 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 is a good thing. And I'm generally speaking in favor of that. Also, another pro, it's easier. The player, the DM, you don't have to track the phases of the moon. You don't have to have that be part of your session maintenance. And at the start of every session, what phase is the moon in? It's new moon, but it was new moon like 3 days ago. So it removes that element of bookkeeping. So I will say that those are the good parts of it. The con is honestly that it's just very safe and very simple. It is, I know a lot of people were excited about Dragonlance because of this idea that like the phase of the moons affect magic and things like that. And maybe there will be some optional elemental aspect of the adventure in the setting that's in the book that acknowledges this and basically says, if you want, your player can decide to be a lunar sorcerer and have it be a involuntary effect by the magic, by the moons, which would be cool. It's just, it lacks that spark of something special based at least on the way that they're talking about it. I could be totally wrong. When it drops and I look at the book, I could be like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. Each phase of the moon is so unique and flavorful, and it makes total sense why they would allow you to change it on the fly. But I don't know, like the idea of the moons having an involuntary effect on the magic that the players and the monsters are utilizing is compelling and interesting. We kind of saw the removal of stuff like this with the Eberron book. Manifest zones were a big part of Eberron back in 3.5 days. And, it was these like certain parts of the world, magic acts differently. And so if you're in a manifest zone of this plane, then your magic works this way. If you're in a manifest zone for the plane of fire, then fire damage is increased and cold damage is decreased. So that's interesting and compelling. And so something like that for Krynn and the moons would be really interesting. I get why they didn't. I understand it from an academic standpoint, but I will say it is a bit of a disappointment just on its face. Once again, have not gotten a chance to look at the book yet. Once I look at the book, might completely change my tone. Now, flipping the switch to the complete opposite, where they played it super safe with the Lunar Sorcerer. Boo! The new backgrounds and feats, they are swinging for the fence with these. So we have the Knights of Solamnia and the Mages of High Sorcery, which are, you don't have to be a sorcerer or a mage, or like, it's for all spellcasters, at least is what they said. Now they did specifically call out that it's for wizards, sorcerers, or warlocks. They did not say clerics or druids or paladins or rangers. So I don't know. It seems like they're starting to sprinkle in a bit of the 1D&D mechanics that we saw in the character options with this stuff, because the new backgrounds, the Mages of High Sorcery and the Knights of Solamnia, you get a feat with it specific to that background and specific to this setting. And they have included rules, they're saying, where if you don't want to be one of those backgrounds, if you want to be something else, then here is a list of approved feats for you to take at first level. So you have a situation where if somebody plays a variant human or a custom lineage, they are going to be able to have 2 feats at starting level. Granted, one of those is either from a background or from a restricted list, but the other one is not. And so I know a lot of DMs that will probably give them pause. And then Jeremy Crawford, additionally, in the Knights of Solamnia video, further revealed that at a certain point in the campaign, every player is just going to get a free feat. Just an additional feat. Which, when he initially said that, I was like, oh, okay, so we're going for kind of like a superhero vibe, like overcharged player characters. Everybody gets at least 1 feat at first level. At a certain level, you get another extra feat, and we're just cranking it up. But then I was kind of disappointed because he talked about the fact that they're doing the Elder Scrolls philosophy of difficulty curve, where they have made the player characters more powerful. Therefore, they have designed all of the combat encounters to be more difficult. So the power level is still staying level. It's not like the player characters are going to feel way more powerful just by giving them these bonus feats and keeping everything standard. And additionally, it's not like you're keeping the player characters the same and cranking up the difficulty to make the campaign seem super deadly and like this is war, this is crazy, like bad stuff's happening all around you. We're doing both, which means that nothing happens. Sure, you'll get to go up against cooler monsters sooner and all that stuff, but from an actual difficulty curve standpoint, we're not doing anything, which was a disappointment, if I'm being perfectly honest, when I saw that was their design philosophy for the adventure in the new Dragonlance book. And then in this video, we get a lot of background on the Knights of Solamnia and the Mages of High Sorcery and who these organizations are and their place in the world and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And something that struck me as, once again, kind of a disappointment and feels like there's a missing element to this game, and it's something I've talked about in the past in the form of prestige classes or paragon paths. Both the Mages of High Sorcery and the Knights of Solamnia seem like organizations that somebody has to prove themselves to be worthy of. And yet, these are backgrounds that you select at first level. And so, I will get to the Mages of High Sorcery solution to this problem in a second, but I'm still talking about the Knights of Solamnia video. The Knights of Solamnia seem like a super interesting and compelling organization, but they seem like an organization that you would want to make an informed decision about whether or not you want to be a part of them, because they are an organization that is past their prime. They're largely viewed antagonistically amongst the people of the world for their failures in the past. And so it just strikes me as this very cool and interesting story where over the course of the campaign, the player characters meet a group of knights, and then maybe they meet like the larger organization of the knights and they start to learn more about them, and maybe some player characters role play a prejudice against them, but they eventually warm up to them, and it can be a choice down the road of, I want to join their ranks. I understand that, yeah, that we view them as having failed, but I understand now where that failure came from, and yet I still want to be a part of this. And that can be much more compelling and interesting. And I know they don't have to take the Knights of Solamnia background, and they can take the feat later on, and you can tell that story. But a single feat doesn't feel like enough to join such a prestigious organization. In the Mages of High Sorcery video, they get into who the Mages of High Sorcery are and kind of how their feats work, where you take the background and then you can pick which moon you are associated with in terms of your mageness and your magic, with the good moon, the neutral moon, and the bad moon. And that's where you start out. And then a big part of the Mages of High Sorcery is the test. You have to pass a test to be part of this organization. And they have baked in to the campaign a point where they say, if you have anybody on the path towards the Mages of High Sorcery, this is a good point for them to have their tests, which I like that. I like that from a design standpoint of like not leaving it wholly up to the DM, but they're just inserting a slot. At least the way they talked about in this video, they're inserting a slot and a point in the story where it makes sense for the test to occur, but they're still leaving it up to the DM to inject a personal flavor for the test that is fitting to that player character, which I like that balance. I'll be interested to see how that balance looks in the actual adventure, but from a design philosophy standpoint, I approve. That's exactly how I would like to see this kind of thing done, where like you have structurally made a spot for it and tell me as the DM, here's a good spot for it. Now you take the ball and run with it. But once again, it begs the question of why do they have the Mages of High Sorcery background? Why are they taking feats about being a Mage of High Sorcery when they're not? And maybe they're an initiate, maybe that's part of the story that you're telling, but it would be easier and make more sense to me if it were a Paragon Path or a Prestige class, like something that you work towards, and there's this fundamental shift in who your character is and who they are moving forward in terms of their subclass features and their class features and all this stuff. Like, it should be a big deal, at least in my mind. So it's weird. It's an interesting take, but I feel like they're doing their best with the systems that they have. But if they had some different systems, it would be better. Now, here's my biggest problem with this whole thing is it is creating, you are releasing a campaign book, a setting book with a different system than 5th edition, because feats are optional in 5th edition. But the two iconic backgrounds for this setting require feats. I am a dungeon master who, my current home game campaign that I'm running, I do not have feats as something players can take. I put them on magic items. I give them equitable power of feats, but they don't get to take them. They don't get to pick and choose at 4th level. I am now this thing. Nobody got to pick variant human at 1st level because they want to take this feat, or the custom lineage thing because they want to have the sentinel feat or the lucky feat or whatever at 1st level. Because I want to be able to have my pulse on the power level and see how my players are doing. Some of my players have told me, hey, I would like to have this feat at some point, which I am totally fine with them telling me that. And then I can decide when to drop that in. But 5th edition rules as written, feats are optional. Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, feats are required. Because if somebody's playing in the Dragonlance campaign and they're excited about playing the Dragonlance campaign, I can't tell them the Knights of Solamnia background is off limits or the Mages of High Sorcery background is off limits, because that's half the reason they want to play in the setting. And additionally, not only are feats now required, you get them at 1st level. Everybody gets a feat at 1st level. And then you get a free feat down the road. And where this creates a bigger issue is for DMs that have been running the game for a long time. or players that have been playing the game for a long time, or whatever combination, if one person is super hyped for the Dragonlance game and they want to play it and they pitch it to their DM, or it is the DM and they pitch it to their players, now all of a sudden you have a discrepancy in a knowledge of the rules. And you might have some people that come with a character pre-built that, you know, well, I didn't know that I got a feat at first level. And so now, like, this player character who is a mage of high sorcery has a feat at first level. I don't. So now the background that I picked, I'll change that because that background doesn't match up with what I want to do and the feat and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe I'm more concerned than I need to be. But honestly, I'm stoked for the 1D&D rules. I've been very positive about 1D&D. I like the background rules and the character origin options for 1D&D. I love that. For 1D&D, we are still in 5th edition. These books are still 5th edition. I know they're not labeled 5th edition, they're just labeled Dungeons and Dragons. But you're making a fundamental change to the system outside of introducing a new subclass, outside of introducing a brand new class or new races or anything like that. You are changing the function of backgrounds. And that is something that makes me leery about this book and concerned about the design process of this book and whether or not we are in actuality going to have 1D&D as this like delineation, like here is whatever they end up calling it, but 1D&D as a new updated system in 2024. Or if we're going to see stuff like this, where each book that comes out moving forward has an element that we've seen in the playtest material added into the system. And so that by the time 2024 comes around and we get the new PHB, DMG, and Monster Manual, all of these rules have already been implemented for various settings. Like, what is the Planescape setting going to have? Are we going to get this piecemeal version of a new system dropped in through various books, or are they going to hold it off for a new launch? Because honestly, I would prefer the latter. I would prefer a concise, play-tested, new, updated version of the system as opposed to adding half measures in as player options and things like that. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you all think down below. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers. Once we hit it, I'm going to buy a subscriber or whatever book they want off the DMG or D&D Beyond. Single book, no bundles. But yeah, let me know what you all thought below. Thank you all so much for watching. I've been Eric, and I will see you next time.